honestly, comparison is so often a longing for something that we see reflected in someone else. But that longing is so important for us to pay attention to. Where comparison leads depends on how we relate to it. Again, it's not the comparison in itself that's the problem. It's the fruit that it bears in your soul. When it's healthy, it can help us tune into our surroundings and find our place among others. But it's when we move from that calibration to condemnation, when the goal shifts from connection to competition, that we start to lose the grounding in who we are. What is this longing trying to show me? What is it revealing about what matters most to my own soul? This show is brought to you by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and the light fades a little earlier, it's easy to feel the weight of the season. I've been reminding myself lately to reach out, to check in on friends I haven't seen in a while, or to send that quick text that says, hey, you've been on my mind. Shorter days don't have to feel dismal. Staying connected, whether it's calling a friend, grabbing coffee, or even writing a note, reminds us that we're not alone. And that same courage it takes to reach out to someone you care about, it's the same kind of courage it can take to reach out for therapy. And once you do, you often wonder, why didn't I do this sooner? That's where BetterHelp can help. They'll match you with a licensed therapist based on your needs and preferences, and you can switch therapists at any time. With over 30,000 licensed professionals and a 4.9 out of 5 average rating, it's one of the most trusted online therapy platforms in the world. This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it easier to take that first step. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/bestofyou. That's betterhelp.com/bestofyou. It's funny how I can feel perfectly content with my life 1 minute, grateful even, and then 5 minutes on Instagram later, I feel behind, inadequate, or invisible. It happens so fast. Maybe for you, it's not social media. Maybe it's that friend who seems to have the kind of marriage you wish you had, or the sibling who always lands on her feet. Maybe it's someone in your church who seems to have endless blessings while you're just trying to hang on. Comparison has a way of sneaking in quietly. It shows up in our friendships, in our families, even in our faith. One moment we feel grounded, connected, confident in who we are, and the next, that inner voice starts whispering, you're falling behind. She's better than you are. You're not good enough. The truth is, comparison isn't really about envy. It's about longing. The longing to feel seen, valued, and secure in our own story and in our own lives. So as we begin today, I want to invite you to slow down for a moment as you're listening or as you're watching and notice, who do you tend to compare yourself to? Who's that person that stirs up that inner voice of comparison? And most importantly, what messages do you hear about yourself when you notice that person? For those of you watching the video, you'll see a vase of mums here on the screen. Some are in full bloom, right? These red ones took a while to come out, and I love it when they come out in full bloom. They're so beautiful. But you'll also see some of these buds haven't opened up at all, right? They're still closed, but they're gonna bloom soon. And as they bloom, these other ones will start to fade. Each one blooms in its own time. And that's the truth we're trying to return to today, learning how to trust the pace of our own becoming. A little while back, we had asked you to share about your experiences around comparison, and we heard from so many of you, and here's what a few of you had to say.
Hi, Alison. This is Julie from Connecticut, and I was calling to follow up about your question about where I compare myself to others. And one area I noticed in working through some difficult relationships in the past several years is kind of comparing myself to some people who are maybe not acting ways that would be healthy, and kind of constantly trying to criticize myself, like, see, you're acting just as badly as they are.
Hi, my name is Katie from South Mississippi. I often compare myself to where others are in their spiritual journey, and I know what God has placed on my heart and the future that He has for me. I know it's great, but in the moment, in the mundane, I get lost in the daily task of being a stay-at-home mom, and I would love to grow in faith and courage, knowing that what God has shown me in my past for my future will come, and I just need to trust and lean on Him.
Hi, my name's Rebecca. I'm calling from Seattle, Washington. I was just listening to your podcast on comparison, and comparison has affected me psychologically, spiritually for most of my life. I'm pretty new to the faith. I was saved by Jesus in January of this year after a really long, painful divorce, trauma, death, grief. And I had this sensation that God was holding out on me. I would look on Instagram and I would see people getting married and pregnant, and I'm divorced in a, one bedroom apartment trying to make ends meet. In that oppression of comparison, one thing that's really helped me is reflecting on few scriptures like I've seen the God who sees me, and just resting in the assurance that God has a good plan for my life. I've been anchored in the knowing that God is going to use this season of my life wherever I feel lack for His glory, for His redemption. So thank you so much for speaking on this.
You can hear the thread, the common thread of comparison and the ache so many of us feel beneath these stories. Comparison is never really about the other person. It's something deeper going on inside our own souls. And honestly, comparison is so often a longing for something that we see reflected in someone else. But that longing is so important for us to pay attention to. This is the work of what I call taking a U-turn and noticing what's happening inside of us as we're comparing ourselves to others. And I love how each one of these women who shared, thank you so much for sharing, had some reflections on that longing inside and kind of this idea of this is where I want to get to, but this is where I am right now. And that's the work. It doesn't work to shame yourself for feeling comparison or to tell yourself I shouldn't do it. The work is to notice that longing and gently attune to the place inside your own soul that's speaking. Here's the truth. Comparison is wired into us. It's not a flaw. It's part of being human. Psychologists call this social comparison theory. And I write about this in my book, I Shouldn't Feel This Way. Social comparison is the instinct to measure ourselves against others. It's a way of finding belonging and safety. We look around us at others to gauge our own sense of belonging. It's like walking into a room full of people and realizing you didn't get the memo. I do this all the time and I hate it when this happens, but I look around and I see that everyone else in the room is in jeans and t-shirts and I'm standing there in heels and a cocktail dress and wanting to literally just run and hide because I'm not in sort of coordination with the group. And that quick scan, right, to see what's everyone else is doing. How do I measure up? Is your nervous system trying to find belonging? It's how our nervous system once tried to figure out, am I okay here? Do I fit in? Am I safe in this group? Do I belong? Think about when you start a new job or step into a new community, maybe a small group at church or a new job or a new workout class at the gym. At first, you kind of find yourself scanning the room. How do people interact here? What's normal? How do things work? Do people talk to each other? Do they not? I'm trying to figure out what are the social norms in the room. And that kind of comparison is just natural. It's not all bad. It helps us attune to our environments and find our places in it. You're not judging yourself or others. You're just gathering data, right? You're gathering the information. What are the norms here? How do I fit in here? How do I feel safe and connected? In psychology, we call this social calibration. It's how we learn the rhythms of a group so we can find our place within it. It's the part of comparison that says, I want to understand the group here. I want to understand how to belong here. I want to contribute in a way that fits. And we all do this on some level. We look around to others to orient ourselves. We don't want to care too much, right, about what other people think, but we do care a little. It's part of being human. You want to have some sense that you fit in, that you understand, and that you're part of the larger whole. And here's the thing, if you do want to stand out, right, you do want to be different than the group, you do it knowingly because you wanted to, because you chose to, because you understood the norms and you said, this is how I want to be different, not because you misunderstood the assignment. So here's the bottom line. Comparison itself isn't the problem. When it's healthy, it can help us tune into our surroundings and find our place among others. This is part of our biology. It's part of our wiring. It's how God made us. But it's when we move from that calibration to condemnation, when the goal shifts from connection to competition, that we start to lose the grounding in who we are. You know those moments during the holidays when everything finally slows down. The tree lights are glowing, a movie's on, and everyone's cozied up together. That's my favorite part of the season, and that's exactly what Cozy Earth is all about. I love their pajamas and bamboo sheet sets. They're unbelievably soft and make our bed feel like a 5-star retreat. But lately, it's their brushed bamboo pullover sweatshirts and joggers that I can't stop wearing. The fabric is buttery soft, breathable, and honestly feels like a warm hug. If you're looking for that perfect gift for someone who's hard to shop for, Cozy Earth makes it easy. Their bamboo pajama sets sleep degrees cooler than cotton. It's cozy without overheating, and the bubble cuddle blanket is the kind of gift that instantly becomes everyone's favorite. And you can shop worry-free with their 100-night sleep trial and 10-year warranty. But trust me, once you feel this level of comfort, you won't want to give it up. Black Friday has come early at Cozy Earth. Right now, you can stack my code BESTOFYOU on top of their site-wide sale, giving you up to 40% off in savings. These deals won't last, so start your holiday shopping today. And if you get a post-purchase survey, be sure to mention you heard about Cozy Earth right here on The Best of You. Wrap the ones you love in luxury with Cozy Earth. There are actually two kinds of comparison, and we saw these reflected in the messages today. One is called upward comparison. We tend to look towards someone who we think is ahead of us in some way. That can either inspire us or it can leave us feeling deflated, depending on how we relate to it. The other type of comparison is downward comparison, when we look towards someone who seems to be struggling more than we are. And that might give us a sense of comfort, but sometimes it can feed a sense of pride or distance or false confidence rooted in superiority rather in a healthy self-examination. Here's the thing. Neither of these is all bad or all good. Again, it's not the comparison in itself that's the problem. It's the fruit that it bears in your soul. Upward comparison, when you look to someone who you see as ahead of you, can become an inspiration. You see someone who's excelling in a certain way, and instead of shrinking back, you let it wake up something really alive inside of you. It makes you want to run harder and work better and learn how to grow in your own life. You think that's possible. I want to grow toward that. It stirs your creativity or your courage. On the other hand, if you see someone who's struggling and you notice that, not in a condescending way, but in a deeply human way, right? Instead of judging or looking down on or distancing, you pause and you notice. You think, gosh, I see that they're struggling and I feel bad for them. I also am grateful in a way that I'm not struggling in that way. I'm not there anymore. And it reminds you to be grateful for what you have. It brings a sort of healthy humility and a healthy gratitude of, gosh, I'm not there. I've come far I'm at a different place in my life. And that can be another healthy form of comparison when it opens your heart and it awakens empathy as well as inspiration, and it brings you closer both to God and to others and more fully into your true self, where you want to go with your own life. When comparison brings the good fruit of courage or inspiration or gratitude, it's healthy. But here's the thing. So often, and especially in this social media age, comparison starts to bear the fruit of envy, resentment, even desolation and despair. It can also bear the fruit of pride again. When we're divided from our own worth, from our own love, from our own passions, from our own gifts, that's the signal that it's time to come back home to your own soul, that something's off, that there's work to be done inside of you. Comparison becomes a signal, a cue. Oh my gosh, I'm not being inspired. I'm not feeling gratitude. I'm not feeling compassion or empathy. I'm just beating up on myself. I'm just hating on myself. I'm just feeling, sort of desolate inside of myself as I see myself in comparison to others. That's when it becomes toxic. And that's when we have to pause and pay attention, because it's taking us away from our own sense of belovedness. And we forget that, like those moms, right? We have our own pace, our own path. We will bloom in our own time, but we don't want to squash those buds that aren't quite there yet. We want to give them the good soil and the water and the nutrients that they need to bloom in their own time. And this is when we begin to hear that phrase that so many of you have heard. It's called comparison becomes the thief of joy. And it's really true. But I'm not sure that comparison is only the thief of joy. It's also the thief of connection. Because when we're comparing ourselves negatively to other people, whether upward or downward, we're robbing ourselves of connectedness. Instead of seeing people as other people with whom to walk, to be inspired to more greatness, or to understand our own gratitude for where we've come and have a sense of compassion and even a desire to lift up someone else who's struggling, we become really self-focused, right? We become focused on our own insecurities, our own perceived flaws, and we lose connection with other people, with ourselves, and with God. If you think about comparison, right, on a line, right, on a line, I'm holding my hands out here if you're watching the video. At the top of that line is the word inspiration, right? In the middle is observation, and at the bottom is despair, right? Where comparison leads depends on how we relate to it. When it's observation, it's just neutral. I notice something about this other person. I notice something about this other person. I notice where they're struggling. I notice where this person is excelling, right? I'm making an observation. When it moves to inspiration, it helps bring out the best of who we are. When it moves to empathy or compassion, it helps bring out the best of who we are. But when we judge ourselves or judge someone else, it moves down to despair. The invitation with comparison is to stay curious. When we notice that observation, right, when we're noticing what's going on with someone else, is to ask ourselves, what is this longing trying to show me? What is it revealing about what matters most to my own soul? So we've talked a little bit about the psychology of comparison, how it's wired into us, how it can lead us toward inspiration and gratitude, or how it can lead us away from connection toward despair. Now I want to bring this a little deeper into the language of Scripture. I think of Psalm 139. It's such a beautiful verse that we all know. It says, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made." That's not just a poetic statement, right? That's a grounding truth. That's an ontological reality of your being. You are beautifully and wonderfully made. It means that your pace and your wiring and the blooming that you are designed to do was formed with intention and care. God put that in you. It's there. It can't be taken away, right? So when you catch yourself comparing yourself to someone else, it's not just an invitation to stop. It's an invitation to look to God, right? To look to God as that ultimate compass. I think of the plumb line, right? If you're into building or if you're into construction or if you've renovated your house, builders use these plumb lines to make sure that lines are straight. And they're sort of like a weighted magnet that pulls toward the center of gravity to make sure that the line is straight. And that plumb line of who you are and who you're meant to become always has to be anchored vertically, first and foremost, to God, the one who created your soul and designed you for a wonderful purpose and with wonderful gifts to contribute to this world. And ultimately, that has to be the anchoring for our ultimate comparison. So when you notice yourself observing something going on in someone else, right, you take that as a cue and then you always take it back vertically to God. And that's how you begin to bring into check and move toward inspiration, toward gratitude, toward connection, and away from those negative components of comparison. This is about trust. And trust in God is not passive, it's active. It's a partnership. Trusting God includes trusting the person God is forming inside of you, the person He's made inside of you. Sometimes comparison reveals a longing, a spark of something sacred, right? That longing might be pointing you toward a part of your story or a part of your soul that really wants to grow. I remember a season when I was comparing myself to a woman incessantly, and it was negative. But I noticed it and I paused, and this was years ago. She was a writer. She had such a great, lovely presence. She had kids. She worked from home, and she wrote books, incredible books. And I just would notice myself comparing myself to her, and it had a little bit of tinge of envy in that case. But when I paused and noticed it, because I loved this woman, I didn't want to feel that way about her. It brought to life a spark inside of me. I wonder if I could be doing that. I wonder if I could be a writer. And sure enough, here we are. I'm working on my 4th book, and I think that's where comparison can bring to life something inside of you that you want. One of you wrote in, you didn't want to use your voice, but you talked about how you compare yourself to others spiritually. And I thought, what a beautiful cue that a part of you really longs for a spiritually vibrant life. You long for a spiritually vital relationship with God where you're walking in harmony with God. What a beautiful longing. And that cue that you're comparing yourself to someone else is less about the other person and more about an invitation from your own soul. Like, God, how can I move toward that? How can I be inspired to move toward what I really want? And you can take some time to flesh out what you really want. What is it about that draws you? What is it about that might be a little bit different from you? And in that way, comparison can become a signal about what our real longings are. Lori, you mentioned how easy it is to compare yourself to your friends. And I love that you're paying attention to that. Friendship can be such a fertile ground for comparison for all of us. But it's also such a great place to practice this attunement. What is that longing you feel, and how is it actually a signal to honor your own unique desire, something that's showing up inside of you and that before God you could cultivate in the soil of your own soul? Rebecca, you talked about how you've been comparing your stage of life when going through a divorce, making ends meet, and comparing yourself to others on social media. And it makes so much sense that you're feeling that way. I think so many of us can relate to you when we're in a tough season of life. We've just come through something, right? And we see other people in a different season of life, and it's painful. And I hope you know you're not alone, that so many of us have felt that way. I know I have felt that way in different seasons of my life. And that longing, for stability and the joy of a healthy relationship and to feel like you've come through something and you're out the other side is so beautiful. It's a sign that your soul is intact. It's a sign that your soul longs for something God longs for you also to have. And I hear in your desire to trust God and to acknowledge where you are, but to know that you also long for more. Remember, your story isn't behind It's unfolding at a pace that's right for you. God is still writing your story, even in these chapters that feel uncertain and different from others. Julie, you talked about comparing yourself to others with unhealthy habits. I thought it was so interesting because in a way you're criticizing yourself in comparison to others. And sometimes that's how we try to feel safe, right? By kind of looking at others and gauging ourselves in comparison to how they're doing. But it's also a deeper longing. What if that longing is some part of you that's kind of trying to tell you, I want to work on some habits. I want to work on some habits. I don't want to beat myself up about them, but I want to work on some habits in my own life. What's that deeper longing? And how can you take that longing and move it away from that horizontal comparison and toward that vertical inquiry with God? God, what's this about? What part of my soul is speaking to me and longing for something that actually has nothing to do with these other people, but that is all about my own health and something that you're calling me to into a deeper grace and the freedom to release this sense of comparison, both toward others and this criticism toward my own self. So whether it's friendship, faith, or life stage, or someone else's habits, each of these longings points us back to the same truth. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Your timeline is not their timeline. Your story is not their story. And the God who formed you is still forming you. So what does this actually look like? Moving from comparison into a deeper sense of connection with ourselves, with God, and with others. How do we take that moment of noticing, that observation, that spark of longing, and turn it into something life-giving? Here's a simple practice I often use. It's the name it, frame it, brave it model that I write about, and I shouldn't feel this way. I want to walk through these briefly together as we close. Number one, I want you to name it. Name it. Recall a recent situation that evoked a negative comparison. Get specific. Who was it? Was it social media? Was it a friend? Was it a church group? Was it in your own family? And just name it and make a note of it, especially if it's recurring. Number two, frame it. What messages do you tell yourself about this situation? Are you self-critical? I should have been better. I should be more like they are. Do you notice guilt messages? I shouldn't feel this way. Do you feel envy? I want what they have. Do you notice self-doubt? I'll never be good enough. Right? The second part of framing it is to normalize it. This is part of being human. Everyone compares. Everyone has moments of insecurity and longing, right? This is part of being human. It's the sign that your soul is working. You're not broken because you feel this way. You're alive, right? This is the sign of a healthy soul. It's what you do with it, right? So reframe it in your mind that way. When you notice comparison, don't beat yourself up, but instead notice that, oh, this is it. There I go again. That part of me is scanning for belonging, and it's normal, and everyone does it. And then number three, we get into the final step, which is brave it. Ask yourself, what is a step I can take? I've kind of analyzed and thought about this observation, right? I want it to move me toward inspiration, toward gratitude. So what is a step I can take? Maybe it's showing you a value you hold, something God has placed within you that wants attention. What's a step I can take toward nurturing that value? Maybe it's showing you a need for rest. Maybe you need more encouragement, maybe to find a sense of purpose, maybe to find more connection. What step can you take to cultivate those things in your own life? Whatever it is, always bring that observation, that comparison back to that plumb line, anchoring yourself in the love of God. You might simply pray, God, show me what you're forming in me through this feeling. Or you might just say, thank you, God, for the life you've given me today. Thank you for what's mine to hold and what's mine to release. Gratitude doesn't erase longing, it grounds it. It helps you see your own story with tenderness, always in the light of God's love for you. When you put these steps together, you start to rewire how your soul responds. Comparison becomes a cue for connection. Longing becomes a doorway into greater relationship with God. And slowly you begin to live from that deep, steady place inside, the place where you know who you are. You know you are fearfully and wonderfully made. Take a moment as we close and just picture that person you often compare yourself to. Notice what you feel inside. Maybe it's tension, maybe it's envy, maybe it's sadness. Now, bring that part of you, your comparing part of you, into the light of God's love. What does that part of you need from God right now, today? As we close, I want you to remember this. Comparison is a signal, not a sin. It's a messenger from your soul, a sign that something inside you is longing to grow, to be seen, to be loved. And God's plan has always included your becoming. It's not just about the destination, right? It's about the slow, sacred process of who you're becoming along the way, right now. Today. Trusting God means trusting that God is forming something beautiful and good within you, even in the waiting, even in the wondering, even in the comparison. And remember, gratitude always restores your sense of enoughness. It grounds you back in your own story, reminding you who you are and whose you are. There is such beauty in blooming right where you are today. So as you head into your week, I want to leave you with this affirmation. There is no timeline on your becoming. The same God who made you uniquely is the one who's growing you at your own pace. Take a few minutes today to journal or pray about one area where comparison has been whispering to you lately and ask God, what are you showing me through this longing? Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Best of You. Be sure to check out the show notes for any resources and links mentioned in the show. You can find those on my website at dralisoncook.com. That's Alison with one L, cook.com. Before you forget, I hope you'll follow the show now so that you don't miss an episode. And I'd love it if you'd go ahead and leave a review. It helps so much to get the word out. I look forward to seeing you back here next Thursday. And remember, as you become the best of who you are, you honor God, you heal others, and you stay true to your God-given self.